the turn of the 20th century, Paris was the center of fashion for the Western world. Designers like British-born Charles F. Worth, Jean Paquin, and Calo Sur designed for members of royalty, socialites, and other wealthy clientele. Their designs were followed by the fashion media and often copied by other designers, manufacturers, and dressmakers throughout Europe and North America. At the turn of the century, Oregon women wore apparel styles similar to styles worn in the more urban and cosmopolitan areas of the United States and Europe. However, in following fashion, Pacific Northwest women tended to adopt styles that were, according to one clothing historian, easy to create, and to ignore those styles that required better craftsmanship. Margaret Lambert noted that, though Northwest American women wore simplified and easy-to-construct styles, they were surprisingly fashionable. Sally Helvinson noted a slight time lag from the moment styles were introduced in Paris and adopted by high society women in New York, Pittsburgh, Chicago, and other cities throughout the United States, before the style, in a modified form, made its way throughout the rest of the country. The style lag was attributed to the time it took pattern companies to assess, adapt, and incorporate European fashion into their styles. It also took time for the magazines and patterns to be distributed and for the garments to be made. The purpose of this paper was to determine the usefulness of Rogers's theory of diffusion of innovations related to a single case study of historical style adoption, the adoption and diffusion of capes in turn-of-the-century Oregon. While researching late 19th and early 20th century outdoor extant Oregon garments, we found large numbers of capes and wondered about the influences on their adoption and use. An innovation is an object or idea that is perceived to be new. The diffusion of an innovation is the spread of this object or idea within and across social systems over time. Time is an important characteristic of the diffusion of innovations. Innovations may diffuse throughout social groups rapidly or slowly. Innovations may even skip an entire social group. According to Rogers, whether members of a particular social system adopt a new innovation depends on certain characteristics that influence its rate of acceptance, including relative advantage, compatibility, complexity, triability, and observability. The innovation will be adopted if an individual or group considers it to be an improvement over what was used, or in this case, worn before it. The new innovation must be compatible with the lifestyle and self-concept of the individual or group adopting it. The new innovation must not be too complex to use or to implement. An individual or group must be able to try out and experiment with the new innovation before they decide to adopt it or reject it. Finally, the results of adopting the new innovation must be visible to others, which enhances its visibility and furthers the diffusion process. Rogers identified 5 states that people experience when deciding to adopt or reject an innovation. These include knowledge, persuasion, decision, implementation, and confirmation. Knowledge is when an individual or group first becomes aware of the new item. During the persuasion stage, an individual forms an opinion of the innovation. During the decision phase, the individual decides whether to try out or reject an innovation. But during the implementation phase, the individual makes a final decision of whether to fully adopt or reject the innovation. Finally, during the confirmation phase, the individual decides whether to continue using the new innovation or to pursue other items or technologies. Much of the published literature has focused on how, or more precisely who, helps introduce a new innovation to a particular social group. With regards to fashion, innovators are generally more interested in fashion and keeping current with the latest trends than others. They read fashion publications, tend to spend more time and money shopping than others, and have an intrinsic need for variety. Innovators may include fashion designers and apparel manufacturers. Early adopters are those that adopt the trend early in the adoption cycle, and they help others in a social group decide what looks good, what to buy, and helps to shape others' opinions of new innovations. Once the innovators and early adopters are seen wearing and heard discussing a new innovation, others are likely to adopt the style since the innovators and early adopters have made it safe to do so. Opinion leaders might be early adopters who help others in a social group decide what looks good, what to buy, and help shape others' opinions of the new innovations. Opinion leaders can also include fashion editors and others in the media who report on new fashions. Other adopter categories include early majority, late majority, and laggards, or those who adopt a new style only after it's already becoming passé or unfashionable. Faust, Castle, and Herr proposed to include a non-adopter after they concluded that not every social group will adopt a new innovation. Rogers' theory of diffusion of innovations has been used to explain the spread of a number of recent fashion innovations. Fashion innovators have also been examined. There are, however, few studies that have explored the diffusion of historic fashions. Capes were a popular outdoor garment and one of the most frequently illustrated 1890s outdoor garments in fashion magazines Harper's Bazaar and The Delineator. Magazine writers suggested fabrics and trims that would complement the wearer, where they intended to wear the garment, and their budget. Capes were also popular ready-to-wear outdoor garments available in the Sears, Roebuck & Company mail-order catalog. Sears offered mass-manufactured apparel available to even rural consumers, made possible by the Post Office's Rural Free Delivery Service, which began in 1896. Capes were not only popular proposed outdoor garments, but they were also the most frequent extant 1890s outdoor garment found in museums throughout selected regions of Oregon by the researchers. While researching late 19th and early 20th century outdoor extant Oregon garments, we found large numbers of extant capes and wondered about the influences on their adoption and use. Of the 4 decades studied, 1880 to 1919, extant 1890s capes were in the greatest numbers. While capes are quite old in origin, they are not a consistently fashionable style. They made a fashion comeback in the late 19th century when the large puffy sleeve was in style. Capes, which are aesthetically pleasing, were both easy to construct and also one of the first women's garments that could be purchased ready-made at a variety of price levels. Many of the extant capes were made of good quality fabrics, usually of a dark color, with intricate trimmings. The versatility of capes may also symbolize the change in turn-of-the-century women's roles. Capes could be seen as modern, symbolizing women's changing social roles, yet conforming with the view that women should reveal little of themselves in the street. At the turn of the century, more Oregon women took jobs outside the home. Activities outside the home also increased for those who didn't work. They often kept busy with charity events, women's organizations, and other social engagements. By the 1910s, the dark, somber-looking cape was no longer stylish in fashion-forward circles. Capes with different fashion style characteristics would return over the years, but the turn-of-the-century cape was too identifiable as Victorian and generally would not be worn again unless for costume. Eventually, these garments were donated to museums with little to no information about who owned the garment or where it might have been worn. To examine the popularity of capes in the 1890s, those capes with provenance, though few in number, may shed some light about the women who wore them and their adoption and diffusion. For example, one cape was made specifically to wear to a ball and never worn again. While many explanations are possible, the owner was perhaps an early adopter who stopped wearing her cape when more women adopted capes, or maybe she had nowhere special to wear her cape. Most existing cape stories were about multiple uses and multiple owners, suggesting that some Oregon women did not always have fashionable outdoor garments. The cape was likely adopted by women who need an outdoor garment to fit over the voluminous sleeve style. Fashion magazines of the 1890s were filled with descriptions and illustrations of capes. Dress historian Sandra Buckland discusses the importance of historic research in making new connections among disciplines through developed theories like Rogers' theory of diffusion of innovations. Developed theories like this one can help historians answer the so what of their research, and it can enhance dress scholarship by helping to generalize research to others. Rogers' diffusion of innovations framework provides historians with useful concepts with which to consider style changes. While limited records and artifacts restricts the ability of the scholar to test the framework, all 5 of Rogers' characteristics appear to have been present during the 1890s adoption of the cape in Oregon, indicating fashion diffusion. The cape was adopted by women from a variety of social classes and fit over the voluminous sleeves popular during the period, i.e., a relative advantage. The cape fit women's changing social roles, i.e., compatibility. The cape was not complex and fit a variety of lifestyles. Women could buy or make the cape in a variety of materials and could experiment with dress details, i.e., triability. Finally, the cape was definitely observable. With more active women outside the home, their use of the cape would be noticeable. The cape could also be seen illustrated in a variety of print media and available to purchase in mail order catalogs or at local stores. Finding additional extant capes with provenance and extant women's diaries may provide further evidence of the usefulness of this theoretical framework in explaining the adoption of capes in Oregon in the 1890s. With more research on the diffusion of historic fashion innovations, it may be possible to track the timing of innovations, external influences like war, weather, culture, and so forth, and other key factors that influence the adoption and diffusion within and across social groups. It's important to understand the rate and process of diffusion of historic fashion innovations, just like it's important to study the diffusion of more recent styles, not only for museum curators to interpret the large numbers of extant capes in museums throughout the country, but also to know how consumer behavior has developed over time. Knowledge of this process is important to retailers, designers, and manufacturers and others in the fashion industry who rely on fashion forecasting to predict consumer behavior. Prediction is key to the financial profitability of companies. In addition, it's becoming increasingly important to know what your consumer will buy as commodity prices continually increase and the cost to manufacture apparel continues to rise. According to Margaret Lambert, the museums contain numerous examples of elaborate little black shoulder capes, highly decorated for dressy occasions.